Welcome into the Atlanta Sports Party, your home for the best Atlanta sports talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I am your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Maria Martin. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers, join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And of course, our Atlanta Sports Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So will a malpractice suit be filed 2 weeks from tonight? And the Hawks' real nemesis is back. And are there new favorites in the NL East? We'll talk about it right now. So Jarvis, let's get right into it. Maria, let's get right into it. JD, what could Terry Fontenot do 2 weeks from tonight to make you accuse him? Of course, we are saying all of this in jest, but accuse him of GM malpractice at number 8.
You know what? I am going to charge Terry Fontenot. Terry, listen up. This is that time of year, Maria. You know how I get out. You know, I start
right into the camera. Right
into the camera. Hey, Terry, let me tell you something, man. I'm going to charge you with a felony, a F. I'm put an F on your record if you draft a wide receiver in the doggone first round. I promise you. I promise you. I'm going to charge you with an F. You know what I'm saying? Because I really feel like this is all signs point to, somebody on the defensive side of the football. Of course, y'all know my preference. I get down. Edge rusher, somebody put quarterback on the ground. But I wouldn't be mad at the cornerback, right? You know what I'm saying? I understand. I get it. But, we understand the influences that, Arthur Smith had, being offensive coordinator for the team as well. And, best player available, scoring league, quarterback league, all that good stuff. I get that. But if there's somehow, they say, come to that podium, and Roger Goodell says Rome Odunze or Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors for the Atlanta Falcons at the number 8 overall pick, I'm going to be looking at Raheem real funny. Let me tell you something. So, yes, I will be charging Terry Fontenot with an F. And I'm going to be looking at Raheem Morris like, hey, bro, you probably about to go get in this paddy wagon too.
So, if a receiver is a felony, which pick is a misdemeanor?
Ooh, oh, wow. Oh, man, that's a good question. I would probably say a defensive tackle.
Okay.
Kind of like Byron Young. If he's there, he's a really solid defensive tackle. And, Grady's not getting any younger. David Onyemata, he's on the plus side of 30 as well. So I feel like
So you still get arrested if you there and get a D tackle. I got you. All right,
pretty quickly if you get a defensive tackle, right? You know how long it is. Yeah. So yeah, you won't be in jail for the night. You'll be able to get out pretty quickly if you draft a defensive tackle.
Maria, what about you? What would make you charge? We put it in air quotes. Terry Fontenot with a felony for GM malpractice if he picks that guy at 8.
Yeah, look, I'm in the same boat as Jarvis, actually. I think that if he picks a wide receiver, we're going to have a lot to talk about, not in a good way. This is a draft that has a lot of really good and talented receivers, and it's loaded at that position for sure. But what that also means is that you can easily get that in the later round, and there is so much depth to that position. I just don't think, as much as the Falcons do need skill players, which they have some good pieces, but they could always use more. Everybody could always use more. As much as they want to add another weapon, I think there are higher needs. Edge would be my first. I really want them to pick a defensive guy. We've seen offensive guys fly off the board in the first round for the Falcons these last few years. You need to look at the other side of the football because it needs help, and it needs help now.
Yeah, I would agree. And what about misdemeanor, where you'd be like, I'm not going to really hold you truly in contempt, but that one made me side-eye.
I mean, if we're going to continue with the theme of skill player, anything but like a tight end, maybe, if we're going to go that route again,
I agree.
Which that could be on the same playing field as a felony, honestly, at that point, because that is not what we need to be doing. But I mean, I think that there is a lot of other things that you could draft before that. I wouldn't even be mad at an offensive lineman. I just that would be okay for me. It wouldn't be my first choice, but I wouldn't be up in arms if they decided to go offensive lineman round 1.
Yeah, I have to give the same as you guys. So I'm not going to say anything but co-sign because truthfully, I think everybody feels the same. Like, we know what might make you smile a little bit, Terry, but you gotta kind of do what is not your normal, which we understand is best available. But really, it's need. Need has to go first this time around. And when you think about Raheem Morris being back in his first year, back in the saddle with the Falcons, back in the saddle as a head coach, how big of an effect can this have on him as far as making this choice, making the right choice for this team, and the right choice for the short term and the long term?
Yeah, I think one of the things that you have to take a look at is because I like a lot of times people want to say coming into the offseason, understand that there's a need at the edge position. A lot of people say, hey, well, just go get it in free agency and all this stuff. And I was like, got secondhand pass rushers cost a lot of money. And also there's a added risk involved too, right? Because there's a reason why that team doesn't want to pay them. Like the Brian Burns, for example, we understand what he did against the Falcons consistently, and he talked about it post game, but the Panthers still figured out a way not to pay him, and they traded him away to the New York Giants. So when you think about that aspect of it, I want some homegrown guys. Like even we talked about, the Falcons have had a effective pass rusher since John Abraham.
Yeah, and he wasn't. That's still a conversation.
Like that is a long time ago. So I am tired of secondhand edge rushers. So get somebody that's homegrown. So I feel like Raheem Morris understands finding value, right? They had Byron Young last year, who ended up getting 8 sacks as a rookie for them. And he was drafted in the third or fourth, I think it was the third round. So when you think about finding that value, I feel like this is a draft that, not only get something in that first round, but get somebody that's, find some value in those mid rounds that can come in and get you 5 or 6 sacks as well, because it's all about having a party. You don't want to just be looking at one guy on third and long to get to the quarterback.
Yeah. And Maria, when we think about the last regime in Arthur Smith's third year, all eyes were on what that pick was going to be. But Raheem's got to get this right in his first year. So what's that impact, like the importance for you, as you mentioned, whether it is an edge rusher or whether it's a corner, what's important for you to see so you feel like, okay, he understands the impact of this pick?
Oh, first of all, Jarvis, Abe is my guy, and so I'm gonna have to text him that. It's just gonna make his head even bigger than it already is, and I love it.
I love Abe. I love Abe.
I smiled so big when you said Abe. I was like, oh, he's gonna love this. Okay, so anyways, yeah, I mean, I think that it's heavily linked to Raheem's success for the future. I look at what happens with the quarterback first for him before the draft. Honestly, I think that that's ultimately why Arthur Smith is not here. Raheem said similar comments at the combine, so a little bit more aggressively than that, obviously. But I mean, I'm looking at that first when it comes to determining Raheem's impact. However, we're going to learn very quickly how he can develop players, because that's what the draft is all about, right? Finding the diamonds in the rough, and especially past this first round. Like, it's great they have that first round pick, but what are you going to get past that? As we've talked about before, could it be a Ladd McConkey in a later round? A wide receiver who maybe slipped, could have gone in the first round, maybe gets picked up in the second. Things like that, I think, determine his future more than this first round pick. First round picks are great, and you want them to work out every time, and a lot of times they do. But I feel like he has to get the totality of the draft more correct than the first pick alone. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, because you have an opportunity there with that second round pick. You have an opportunity with a couple of third round picks. So yeah, in its totality, that's what's actually going to determine whether or not your 3 to 5 year plan works out for you, or whether it ends up being a 1 to 3 year plan. Speaking of plans working out long-term, short-term, we're still kind of looking at what's going on down at State Farm Arena and whether or not we can see a path to a long-term or short-term future with some of those players. But we're going to find out really soon, and we're going to talk about it on the other side in the deep dive. This episode of our Atlanta Sports Party is brought to you by FanDuel. You know what time it is, right, guys? It's playoff time. We're here in Atlanta, play-in time in the NBA and NHL as well. There are a lot of battles for some final spots over in the NHL. Baseball's also in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, and that's guaranteed. Again, $150 win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. How cool is that? If you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, you can make your first bet an automatic win. And just a reminder, it's $150, win or lose with FanDuel, because it is America's #1 sportsbook. So guys, we got the opportunity, maybe like late afternoon, when we got those 4 words: Trae Young is available. So we learned that after 6 weeks of waiting, Maria 11 finally returned and had a solid night with 13 points, 11 assists, 4 rebounds. So that in 21 minutes, obviously on a minute restriction, coming back from that torn ligament in his left pinky finger. But when you see him out there on the court, even we'll talk a little bit about that starting lineup, if you will. What did you learn more so when he comes back? You kind of get reflective. What did you learn more so about who the Hawks were without Trae versus maybe who they have been with him?
First of all, how much did it pain you to say play-in time in Atlanta?
Again.
I'm sorry. I had to go there. I'm so sorry. Back to your question. Chaos. I was like, oh, she's struggling through that right now.
Struggling.
Yeah, but I thought it was nice to see Trae back, honestly. And I thought that he was great afterwards, and what he was saying was he was so reflective on his time, and he was actually asked what he learned about the team, and some of the things that he thought they were working on prior to his departure, they've gotten a lot better at. And to me, what I learned is that this team can be coached really well. And I learned that they can step up in a variety of ways, because it wasn't just Trae that was missing, as we know, and we're going to talk about a little bit more. There's been several different injuries, but Trae's absence, I think, showed me that there are multiple guys who can step up in those holes and create opportunities for themselves we wouldn't have otherwise seen. So that's what I had said a couple weeks ago too, is there's been some players that you look at maybe a little differently now, because they wouldn't have gotten those opportunities had Trae been there. I think it's a great opportunity for this front office, because now they get to learn, hey, what pieces are we going to have now? And then what are we going to move on from? And they wouldn't have gotten that sample size had Trae been there. And February 23rd to now is a long gap of time to figure something out. You have enough of a sample size to figure out what this should look like in the future. And so to me, that's what I learned. And I also learned that this group is bizarre in a lot of ways.
Yeah, bizarre is definitely the word for this time with Trae Young being out, because when you think about what DeAndre Hunter was drafted here to do, right? A number 4 overall pick. You expect him to be that starter, a guy you can lock in as a 3-and-D guy, but when Trae being out, we turned out, hey, this dude might be the guy to come off the bench for you. He can give you some scoring off the bench, take advantage of some matchups in those second rotations and around the NBA, right? We saw him do that pretty consistently. And another thing I feel like that Trae probably, I'm gonna make a big assumption here that he learned while he was out. He was like, hey, I can kind of trust these guys, because I never forget the look on his face last night when he passed the ball to Garrison Matthews. He doggone spotted up that bad boy, whoop, all net. And Trae was like, oh, okay, all right, cool. Yeah, that's another dime for me. I can trust you to shoot the rock, right? And then you even saw Trae giving the ball up to Bogdanović. Him kind of going on the screen, and then Clint Capella setting the screen, and Bo finding him on the wing for the 3-point shot in the corner. So all that type of stuff is just like, all right, I could play off ball, and I could trust my teammates to hit the shot without me having to, exert all that energy, and I can kind of wait till the fourth quarter, kind of how the other superstars do it around the NBA. Yeah, I think it was a lot that we learned, and I think that, Maria, you're spot on. I feel like Landry Fields, you got some work to do, Jack, because it's a lot of decisions that's going to have to be made with this roster, because I'm glad that they didn't do too well, like T talked about pre-show, because they say for some strange reason they want to say, hey, maybe we could make this work. No, you got to make changes, and you got to figure out and make sure you make the right decision, because there is something about what Trae brings to the table, and I feel like it's unmatched on this roster and in the rest of the NBA.
Yeah, and for me, I learned that you actually have some pieces that you can package up to maybe get one of those stars, so that you can maybe get a full-on big 3, should you be able to figure out how to keep Trae and DeJounte. And I think, too, we learned that the one move that Landry feels maybe his best move of all was Quinn Snyder, getting Quinn Snyder. So he's made one move. Now what you have to do is put that on repeat as it relates to getting the proper players around you. And like you said, it's become more difficult because of how others like Beat Krejci have shown out, like Bruno Fernando has stepped up to the table. And like you said, DeAndre Hunter has embraced his role coming off the bench. And embraced is an important thing because none of us really kind of knew what that was going to be, or even a Kobe Buffkin finally healthy and we're able to see what the Rook can do. So yeah, I think that this is going to be an interesting time, and also an interesting time because like you said, Maria, it reminds us of the sample size that Quinn Snyder had of 22 games last year with the entirety of the squad. Then now he's had about a similar sample size of about 17 games or so. And he's able to look at this squad and say, oh, okay, well, this is what these players are able to do. And I think that's going to be important now that we've learned today that Jalen Johnson and Onyeka Okongwu essentially will not be back for the playoff run. Jalen, of course, left Tuesday's game. This was the one versus the Heat with the right ankle sprain. It was a re-injury for him, grade 2 lateral ankle sprain. He's not even going to be evaluated again until 3 weeks from now. Onyeka Okongwu, pretty much the same. He underwent a non-surgical procedure Tuesday for that inflammation in his big left toe. He won't be reevaluated for another 4 weeks. So I think that also puts some pressure on Landry Fields to figure it out, because now you're looking at the thing that's been the Achilles heel, that guy that can be a stretch and get out there and defend on the perimeter, shoot from time to time from the perimeter, and then come back and give you the defense under the basket. So Maria, how do you feel this news impacts what the Hawks are going to be able to do for a potential playoff run?
Well, I mean, these are two guys that were playing really well before they got hurt. And so obviously they were a big part of the postseason, of what you thought you could do in the postseason. And I think having them absent really does hurt the Hawks a ton. Also, they have to figure out what they do with Veet. It's Veet, Krejci. Krejci. They got to figure out what they got to do, because under the current CBA, he cannot play in the postseason until they figure out his deal.
Sunday.
So they're going to have to figure that out quick. And look, he's looked really great. He did last night whenever Trey came back. He's been a surprise piece for them. He's done a lot of very nice things, especially on the perimeter. He can shoot really well. So they do need to figure that out. And look, this is a big loss because, again, these are two guys who were playing really well. I think Jalen, as I've said before, is a secure piece of the future.
Yes.
So you're going to have to figure things out outside of that. But I think he's already solidified his role, so much so that I think his absence really does damage to this roster when he's not around.
Oh, indeed, because he's that guy who I think we all agree Trey's your most valuable player because that's your franchise player, your superstar. But the guy who is your most important player by far this season has been Jalen Johnson. And Onyeka Okongwu, the one thing that I always say with him is he just shines when it comes to bigs. He absolutely can get in there with the best of the bigs in a way that Clint Capella can't quite, because he can go out to the perimeter and do some damage with those bigs that can go out to the perimeter as well. So yeah, I think those two losses really hurt.
Yeah, it just sucks, to be honest with you, because like with Trey coming back and looking like he did, and I just love his competitiveness, because when you think he was asked about, after the game about what was it like being on the sideline, he was like, man, it was awful. Like, I was ready to get back. And that just lets you know, like, he doesn't like watching from the sidelines. I love that. Like, guys who comfortable being hurt and being on rehab all the time, like, I don't really, rock with those guys long term. Guys who hate that stuff, they hate being in the tub, because the best ability is availability to me. Yeah. And for a guy like Trey to come back, and then his running mate, for most of the season, Jalen Johnson being out, and then you got Onyeka Okongwu, like you mentioned, T. He's a guy that can be a switch defender for you, on that perimeter. As far as with different wings in the league, that's a pretty decent matchup versus a mismatch with Clint Capella on the floor. So when you lose those type of pieces, it's hard to say, hey, they're going to be playing for the 8th seed against the Boston Celtics, and they could potentially move them to a 5th or a 6th game, right? Or that's not a possibility to me with those guys being out.
Indeed. And like you said, Maria, with no Saddiq Bey, like we forget that he's done for the season as well, then
Yeah.
you do have to really think of what you're going to do with Vit Krejci, because you do need some of that perimeter shooting, if nothing else. And he's actually kind of stepped up his two-way play too. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about whether there has been a shift in the NL East. This update for our Atlanta sports party, or this ad, I should say, has been brought to you by Game Time. Now, Game Time has some new things going on. It's the authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets that much faster and that much easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. And if you're like me, I don't mind waiting until that time to get the best deal. In fact, they have last-minute deals that are killer, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest guarantee. So with last-minute deals, you can actually save up to 60% off buying them for sports, for concerts, comedy, theater, and there's a low price guarantee where Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you can find a lower price. You cannot beat that kind of deal. And then there are these cool zone deals where you can save more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the actual seats in that section. Now, you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. It's really simple. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms do apply, but again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. And don't forget, download that Game Time app today after you wrap up watching the Atlanta sports party. And last-minute tickets are yours, lowest price guaranteed. So, guys, we had another one of those setbacks that made, as I like to say, Maria and Jarvis, that made me go to the prayer closet. When we heard, like, I've been in the prayer closet for the Hawks all season long, and here I am 10 games in the prayer closet for the Braves, because unfortunately they're, I'd say, second ace, because you really have two aces on that in that pitching rotation or on that pitching staff. But Spencer Strider goes down, a guy who's worked so hard in the offseason to perfect the third pitch, and really you felt like he was that viable weapon that was on his way to potentially Cy Young. And then all of a sudden you get this. There may be a UCL injury that unfortunately only can be repaired by Tommy John, which means you'll lose him for the season. So, Maria, when you look at, we're going to take a step back and look at the last two seasons, really. And when the bats went quiet for the Braves, that's when you really kind of saw what they were lacking on their pitching staff. I don't want to get too dramatic, but a lot of people have said it's like triggering, because you feel like this is the Braves of the 90s, where you get all these division titles racked up and you don't get that World Series. But does this loss potentially of Spencer Strider, does that indicate that maybe even in the division, there might be a shift there in favor of the Phillies for winning the division and maybe going as far as they went last year?
Honestly, I think it's too early to say that. And if I was going to tell you right now, I would say no, because still the Braves, I think, have the best rotation in baseball. Obviously headlined by Spencer Strider. And I think that it's a bad sign that the Braves haven't given any update. To me, that indicates that it is going to be surgery and he will be done for the year. Again, I'm just guessing. I don't know. Nobody knows right now, but I do not think it's going to be Spencer coming back to any capacity this year. Good news is he's young. He'll be back. That's all fine. My most concerning part about the starting rotation for the Braves is the age, because you get past Spencer Strider and you have Max Fried, who's had a bumpy start to the season, but it's baseball. There's 162 games. He'll be fine. Past that, you have Charlie Morton, who, hello, he's 40 years old. He's fantastic. But throughout the longevity of a baseball season, I don't know what it's going to look like when we get to the postseason. And then you have Chris Sale, who hasn't completed a full season in, 5 years? So that's really tough. But the good news for the Braves is I think that Bryce Elder, who's benefiting for some more time down there in AAA, I think we should expect him to be better than he was last year. That second half of the year, I don't think is indicative of what his future is going to be in this rotation. And then, of course, you have AJ Smith-Shawver, and you've got a ton of other young guys down there as well. Hurston Waldrop, everyone's super excited about. I think he's just too young right now, but there's going to be plenty of guys that have opportunities. And Reynaldo Lopez, obviously in the rotation, he's up and down right now, but you look at the Phillies, they're kind of in the same wheelhouse. They have a true ace in Zach Wheeler, who's one of the best starting pitchers in all of baseball. Then you have Aaron Nola, who has been known to give the Braves fits, but they can hit him for sure. And then past that, they also have a lot of question marks. Ranger Suarez, we know, was super up and down last year. He's not necessarily reliable all the time. Past that, you've got Tajon Walker, who probably about a month away from returning. So, no, I don't think that they edge out the Braves whatsoever, especially not right now in this season. But talk to me as we get later into the season, and some of these guys who haven't played 162 in a long time might be nervous then.
Yeah, and I was thinking the same, like really Memorial Day weekend is that first mile marker in baseball. So let's see where the Braves are, not just record wise, but let's see what some of these pitchers are doing. Because as we speak, as we know, Alan Winans has been tagged for seven runs, and that's not what you necessarily want to see from him, right? Yeah, you don't want to see him get tagged like that. But again, it just kind of takes time sometimes for these guys to get back in it. And who knows? I say when you look at someone like a Hurston Waldrep, yes, he's in Double-A right now, but and the position in outfield is a little bit different from a pitcher, right? So Michael Harris II making that jump as an outfielder is a little bit different from a pitcher making that jump, but you just never know. And then there are players that we haven't talked about in a while. Darius Vines, for example, you never know how he's coming along. And Ian Anderson, and Ian Anderson, you just never know what's going to happen with him. We know that he's still far away from us even getting back into pitching motions or anything that even looks like he's returning. So, but Maria, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah. One thing I would say is that this kind of forces Alex Anthopoulos' hand. If we do lose Spencer for the season, in the past, he's been reluctant to make a big trade before the deadline for a starting pitcher and one that can really solidify your rotation. We saw that in the postseason, how they were lacking in starting pitching. He loves to develop some of those younger guys. Yeah. But I think he's going to have to make a move before the deadline if you lose Spencer for the season. And so I think that they will be fine given that fact, but it also puts them in a corner finally to be like, hey, you got to go out and get somebody.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because I feel the same, like he probably will have to go out and get someone, but I also think he's going to try to kind of show us his wizardry, if you will, the Alex Anthopoulos magic, to where he can wait until maybe he can see who some of the buyers are and who some of the sellers are in Major League Baseball, and maybe that'll give him just a little bit of negotiating power.
Yeah, and I think that his hand will be forced, but I don't think it'll be very close to the trade deadline. I think there are going to have to be several factors in order for his hand to be forced. Meaning, like Bryce Elder, you just mentioned him. If he comes up and stinks it up, and then AJ Smith-Shawver, he comes up and stinks it up, and I think they probably want to hold off on Hurston Waldrep, but with the way he, when they drafted him, he would start flying his way on up through the minor leagues, and is in Double-A right now. We know Alex is not afraid to kind of bring him up there, but I just think there have to be several pieces to fail in order for his hand to be forced. But given how the last two seasons has ended, I really feel like he has to not be forced, but just have some initiative to try to keep that thing going, and bring somebody in and pick up that phone.
Yeah, I think with all of what we've seen over the last couple of years, and him even acknowledging that he should have been maybe, or could have been maybe, a little bit more aggressive in that area. I think you guys are right as well, that we'll see. It may take a moment. It may not be a rush, but it's definitely something that has to be at the top of his list of things to do. And we hope that it stops there, because we're still waiting. The good thing is, when you look at Sean Murphy going down, you knew that you had backup. You knew that you already had resources and reinforcements. But here, this is a little bit different. It's going to be intriguing as we wait in the coming weeks to see how things play out. Listen, we appreciate you stopping by. The Atlanta Sports Party, the Locked On Sports Atlanta YouTube channel, is now streaming 24/7. It's all things Atlanta sports 24/7. And remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also free and available wherever you download your podcast. We'll see you on the Atlanta Football Party Monday.